Okay.
Okay, welcome back. This is our part two, continuing saga of Talent to Strength. I'm back with Jennifer Downing. And look how friendly we are. So we're gonna continue our discussion. If you haven't watched the other video we made, I would suggest starting there because that covers a lot of the basic ground. And it's what led to this conversation where Jennifer suggested that having a little bit of background about the StrengthsFinder would be useful. And then whatever time after that, we have a lot of different things we could cover, tools, ideas, and stuff like that. We'll just try to get the lighting a little bit better here. I don't know if that, this side. There we go. All right, a little bit better. So, yeah, basically we will start with a little bit of how I introduce StrengthsFinder to people. And what I'm trying to do here, Jennifer, is I'm trying to condition their thinking around StrengthsFinder so that they can make it as useful as possible. So I have these 5 principles that I use. And you could use this or not use it or adapt it however you want. But the first thing I do is I talk about these guiding principles. It's just some important things. So I start with this. Your top 5 themes are your talents. They're not your strengths. And I know you and I have talked about it. And the reason I emphasize this point is that so many people think that because it's called the StrengthsFinder, that the results are going to be their strengths. And that makes total sense. And I was under that line of thinking for a couple of years before I realized that there's a difference between talents and strengths. And what Gallup shares are what they call technically your themes of talent. Mm-hmm. So that's what your top 5 results are. And what these do is they describe what you're like when you're at your best. And they describe features of how you feel, how you think, and how you behave that can be productively applied. So that's an important word too, can be productively applied, meaning they can also counterproductively be applied too. And that's really what happens with talents. We don't really think deliberately about how to use them. So sometimes they work great, and then sometimes they work against us. Sometimes if you have like the using your themes, you have activator. We didn't talk about that one much last time. So sometimes it's great when something just needs to get started and we need to move forward. That is a great theme. It's that impulse you have to get moving on things. But there are times where that impulse it may not be the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples that come to mind just to put you on the spot, or you don't have to, but times where you're just so anxious to kind of get going that you're like,
Yeah, well, countless work examples where, you just want to get started on a project, but, you get a little bit into it and then you realize you really didn't do the due diligence that you needed, and then you end up going backwards. So, yeah, or have, I've been in a lot of collaborative process with multiple stakeholders, and sometimes that can get frustrating because you just want to get started.
Yeah.
And so you have to remember that, okay, you got to slow down in order to go forward sometimes. So, right.
Yeah. And that's the nature of work too. Sometimes the best thing you could do is get started and figure it out as you go. And people with Activator are very comfortable doing that. But then there's another theme called deliberative, where it's almost the opposite in a lot of ways. People with deliberative, they don't want to move forward before they have it figured out, before they've accounted for all the risks. And so they're going to be those people that might frustrate you because they're the ones who aren't really ready to go yet. And they're not comfortable figuring it out as we go. They've learned over their life that it's just way better to map out the risks first and then move forward. And so I kind of think of it as activators are like the accelerator pedal, and then deliberative is more like the brake pedal. And which is right? Well, it's very situational, and dependent on a lot of factors, but the point is that you've practiced, you've learned to get through life by just getting started and figuring it out as you go if you need to. That's fine. That's better than sitting still and not getting anywhere. And then people with deliberative have learned that it works really well to be careful and placid and deliberate, hence the word deliberative. And so, like if I'm working with people, activator is very high for me. It's my number 7 or 8 theme. So I have that impulse, and I use it because I know that if we don't do it right now, I may not get to it. So when people make requests of me, I've learned that it's just best I just do it right now rather than I'll get to it later. So it's that strike while the iron is hot mentality. That works for me. And then I'm not so much on the deliberative side, but I can relate to that too. There's certainly occasions where I don't want to move until I know the exact right move to make, which is actually my strategic theme, which I blame for that.
Well, it's funny because I feel like I have a little bit of that in myself too, in some situations.
Yeah.
Like major decisions, I find that I'm like that, I want to know all the avenues. So anyway.
And that could indicate that strategic would be very high for you. Maybe that's not the deliberative theme, because it's actually quite uncommon for someone to have both activator and deliberative. Statistically, people who are high in one are usually low in the other. So I point that out, that your themes, they're features of your character, your ways of thinking and feeling and behaving that we should know, we should factor in. I should know my features. I should know your features. And then how can we get the most out of them? So the second point I try to make is that themes are neutral. And what I mean by that, and the reason I bring this up, is because I'll have people that develop a preference for certain themes. Like they'll say, oh, I only want to work with people that have this theme or that theme. And if they don't have those themes, then I don't want to hire them, or I don't want them on my team. And one example of that is achiever. People really like achievers if they have achiever. And so they have a bias to say, well, if they don't have achiever, then I can't rely on them to get things done, because that's the achiever thing, is they complete tasks. Well, I know a lot of people that are excellent at getting things done and they don't have the achiever theme. So it really concerns me when people start wanting to cherry pick the themes. I think it's a misuse of this tool. Anybody with any set of themes can be successful.
Right.
So all themes are valuable, and that's really what I'm saying here. And the idea is to be as effective with your themes as you can be by understanding them and learning how to use them. And I know that I'm designed for a certain kind of work. I'm designed for abstract thinking and concepts, and I don't particularly enjoy the details and things like that. So I learned to steer my ship a little bit more towards those kinds of tasks and that kind of work when possible. The other thing is I hear people will, they may have a theme or two they don't really like. A good friend of mine, she says, I have all the boring themes. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't be my friend if you had only boring themes. For her, she sees them as boring. And I think that people do that. They sort of don't appreciate what they have. And there's this little phrase that I heard once I really like to capture this idea. And the phrase is standing on a whale fishing for minnows. And I know it's kind of like a weird thing, but I mean, I just picture, you want to have a fish. And so you're out there fishing for little minnows or whatever, but you're standing on this big, big fish. And I know technically a whale is a mammal and all that, but the idea is that you have the big fish right under you, but you don't appreciate it because it's always there and it's just part of the scenery. And I think that's how a lot of people view their own themes. They don't get as excited about it. And they might hear someone else's themes and go, oh, those are really attractive and exciting, and I wish I had those. But all themes are valuable. All themes have something to contribute. And so I share that point. Again, more things to kind of get people in the right mindset to use StrengthsFinder. Themes are not labels. So you're not an input, or you're not a learner in the StrengthsFinder sense of things. The problem here is that people tend to like take things that aren't real and make them real. There's a word for that. It's called reification in psychology. It means to make concrete. So you're making something concrete that really isn't concrete. Any of your themes, harmony or competition or responsibility or restorative, those things don't exist in the physical world like a pen or, this is a concrete thing. What the themes are is they're called constructs. They're concepts that we know affect the world around us, but we can't hold them physically. They don't have a physical form. Love is a construct. Mm-hmm. So these 34 themes in StrengthsFinder are constructs, and I don't want people to kind of get stuck with the label. And so that's why I bring up this point. Mm-hmm. Instead, they're resources that you draw from to be at your best. They're resources, they're qualities, they're not concrete things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, people need one another. We can't have all 34 themes in our top 5. I'm not really good at math, but I've tried this, and you just can't have all 34 themes in your top 5. And I think that's a great message. I think people need to hear this because we have such a perfectionistic society, and we think we have to be everything, and it puts a lot of pressure on us that's not realistic. So what I say instead is that, and I heard a mentor say this once, he said, the possibility for perfection does not lie in an individual. The possibility, if there is one, for perfection lies in the community. That, with one another, and this is a great point to tie it into the community building theme, is that sense of I'm great in certain areas, and I'm very vulnerable or not very good in many other areas, but you're strong in some of those areas where I'm weak, and I'm strong in some areas where you're weak. So if we can come together and build a sense of community, we can exchange in valuable ways and appreciate one another's contributions. And a phrase that I like for this is complementarity of excellences. Yeah, it's that idea that it's the idea I just explained. We complement each other where we are excellent. And these are the qualities of the best partnerships and the best teams. You don't want everybody to be the same on a team. Using basketball, you don't want everybody to be 7 foot tall and really slow. You want some people who are tall. You want some people who are fast and nimble, and maybe they're not as tall, and and can pass really well. And so, we really need to specialize and find what our unique specialization is, grow it, and develop our life around that specialization. So any thoughts on any of these so far?
Well, I like the 4th point a lot. It resonates with me, given I've done a lot of work, like I said, with collaborative process for social change. And that's, just at the center of it, why we work across the aisles, to really have, if you're trying to achieve a systems level change, you have to go outside of the walls of your office and work across sector, and in order to have success.
Yes. Yeah.
So point 4 really resonates with me a lot.
Very good. Yeah, and really, it's one of the things that I think is one of the most powerful messages of StrengthsFinder is, of course, there's many people who subscribe to this collaboration mentality, but what StrengthsFinder does is it actually gives you some very definitive ways to understand what those complements look like. It gives language, a common language around it. So I think of StrengthsFinder as almost like an alphabet, and 34, there's 32 letters in our alphabet, I think. I don't know. 35. I mean, like
yeah, close
it's been a
enough.
while since my phonics lessons in 3rd grade. And then 34 themes. And so you combine these themes to make different words. So your top 5 themes are sort of the word for Jennifer, you know. My top 5 themes are the word for Adam. And then we can combine those words to make sentences. Anyway, so very useful. And then the 5th point is that I want to encourage people to approach life from a position of strength instead of a position of weakness. And I've been in situations where I've clearly been in a position of weakness, but didn't know it till after. Maybe other people knew that I was in a position of weakness, but, you know, we're polite or passive and we don't really say, we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, that, hey, you're not really cut out for this. This isn't really the right role for you, but I want that role, I for whatever reason. And, you know, I put myself in positions of weakness. But if I can understand how I'm designed, then I could better position myself to be in a role of strength. And so when I'm at the beginning of a project in the creative phase and the planning phase, I'm much stronger than when I'm at the latter end of wrapping up the details and finishing it, because my mind has already moved on to the next thing. I get excited by new projects and I enjoy playing with the possibilities. I don't really enjoy implementing the realities. So I could try to be that person, but I'll be in a position of weakness, whereas there's other people who are really great at following through on very clear and succinct tasks. They get pleasure out of it. They're good at it. And neither is true for me. So in order to do that, though, we have to be mindful in how we grow our themes and how we put ourselves in situations and manage our life so that we could be in those positions. I talked about the emotional intelligence model, where you have self-awareness at the base, and then you have self-management and social awareness, and then you have social management at the top. And so really that base of self-awareness allows you to manage yourself better. It allows you to be aware of what other people are good at and who might be better for certain things. And both of these allow you to really manage those social interactions for effective teams, effective partnerships, you know, less time spent on drama or all of that. So these are some thoughts that I use to kind of condition people's thinking around StrengthsFinder. So then I get into, well, what is the StrengthsFinder? And this is getting into that stuff, the history of StrengthsFinder. So I just say some basic things. First, StrengthsFinder is a tool for measuring talent. And it measures it in those 34 areas that they've identified. And when I get into the history, I'll explain why it's pretty cool how StrengthsFinder went about codifying these 34 themes. That it's one of the things that makes it really credible for me and for people who are skeptics. I want to make a quick point about that too. I don't mind if someone's skeptical about StrengthsFinder. You know, I get people who are like, I don't need no assessment to tell me who I am. And they do it in just that voice, you know, too. No, but and I get it because there's all these assessments all over the place. And, you know, some of them are silly, you know, like on Facebook, and I talk about which Harry Potter character are you and all of that. And, you know, those are fun maybe, but I could see why somebody wouldn't put much stock in that. But with StrengthsFinder, there's more to it than just some random set of qualities. And we'll get into that when I explain it. So another basic point is that your top 5 themes are in order of how you scored the highest. What you don't know is, like, if your number 1 is like way ahead of your number 2 and 3 and 4, or if they're kind of clustered close together. You don't know the exact scores, but you do know that your number 1 theme is the one where you scored the strongest. So I think that's important because I often think of it as the lead horse. I think of like these 5 as like out of 34, you know, picture a list of all 34. Basically, your number 1 theme is the one that's the most well-developed instinct you have, and therefore it's the fastest, it's the most immediate. Whereas your number 34, like my 34 is called includer. It's a quality of like making sure everybody feels welcome, making sure everybody's voice is heard. That's my number 34. Now, you could assume like, oh, Adam excludes people because includer is so low. He may be an excluder. And I'm not an excluder. I don't like see somebody who's left out of the discussion and I'm like, yeah, stay out. I don't wear a jacket that says members only and just shove it in my face, you know? I'm not exclusionary. It's just,
that shows our age.
Yes,
right. I'm
right.
laughing at that and that you brought that up as a reference.
I think they're coming back. Yeah. But it's that, it's just that I'm slow to think, oh, right, yeah, let's hear from everybody. My mind is in other places. Whereas somebody who has includer number one, that's going to be their priority. They're constantly scanning their environment for if everyone's comfortable. I mean, they make great hosts. They're very hospitable, and they go out of their way to make people feel welcome. And that's at the forefront of their mind. So clearly, includer is a valuable thing. It's just not something that I've cultivated because maybe I'm a snob or I don't know. You know, I'm just a little slow in that regard. But then sometimes I could be very inclusive, and knowing it's my number 34 has actually made me more mindful of it. Anyway, so my point is that I kind of think of the 34 as like speed of response. Which part of you responds first? And I also think that we have all 34 themes somewhere in us. They're part of the pool of human qualities that exist, and we're humans, so we have that. But just some people are more fluid and facile in those arenas than in others. All right. So I talked about this. Everyone has all themes ranked from highest to lowest. There's over 13 million people have taken it. That we just crossed that bridge about 2 weeks ago. It's December 12th, 2015 or 11th, one of those. And so, you know, and Gallup's goal is to get to 1 billion. They want 1 billion people to take this tool. I think I mentioned to you these numbers, 1 in 278,000. That's the number of, and so when I present this, I ask them what they think that number represents. And usually people get it, you know, or get close. So it's the odds of someone having the same top 5 as you. Very rare, very rare. And then the chance of somebody having the same top 5 in the same order is 1 in 33 million. So, yeah. But I think by the time someone has it in the top 5, that's close enough to say, wow, we must think very similarly. We would relate easily with one another. We would get each other's vibe very easily. So yeah, yesterday I had a conversation with a gentleman. He's a Gallup certified coach in Hong Kong, and his 5 are so different from mine. He is focused and analytical and deliberative. He also has harmony as his number 1, like you. But this guy, he was very precise in the things that the work he does and the things that are important to him, and he very detail oriented, and I'm very abstract and kind of big picture and intuitive. And I could tell, like, we got along great. We had a great conversation. But if we were just to work together, if we were just thrown together, like on an island, our ship crashed or we're in the show Lost and our plane goes down, we'd be like totally different and not getting each other's vibe. Mm-hmm. But knowing that these were his top themes was so helpful in just getting along with him and understanding where he's coming from and anticipating how my communication style might be problematic for him. And so I adjusted a little bit. And anyway, little side note, which as an ideation, that's one of the features, one of the great features. So then I get into, so how was this tool created? So let me get a little drink of water and we'll get started. But any thoughts on any of this in terms of, like, you know, introducing your participants to?
No, I mean, it's pretty clear. I think this whole piece will be very helpful. It'd be helpful to study up on my whole 34 and just generally have, like you said, I think last time we talked, to have a sense of the 34 themes before you even go into this. So I think, I have some studying to do on my end to familiarize myself with all of the themes.
Good. Very good. Yeah. And it takes time. And I think that as you're beginning, I think you should feel totally comfortable with just letting people know, hey, I'm discovering this myself and I'm really excited and I hope we discover it together. And I don't think you have to be like a master with StrengthsFinder, because it'll just happen. If you come to appreciate the tool and enjoy it, you will learn and grow. And that's how it was for me. When I first took StrengthsFinder, it took me a while to get comfortable with my own top 5 themes. And then I got curious about the other 29 themes. So I gave StrengthsFinder to friends and family. And then it helped me get a sense of these other themes that weren't in my top 5. And then you mentioned your 34. Basically, Gallup gives you your top 5 results with the standard StrengthsFinder package. So if your participants ask how they could get all 34, they basically just log into StrengthsFinder and just purchase their full 34 report. And it would be $79 if they've already taken StrengthsFinder. And, it's a little pricey to some people, but it used to be a lot more. Like the only way you could get your full 34 was if you hired a Gallup coach, and then it was $650 to get the coaching with your full 34. So it's come down a lot. So Gallup's really wanted to make that full 34 available. One of the things I like about the full 34, well, 2 things really. I like knowing my 6 through 10, because those are themes that are very available to me, and knowing that they're there helps me, bring those into situations to augment my top 5. It's kind of like your bench on a basketball team. You have one of your players is getting fouled out. You want to bring in your number 6 player or your 7 player. And then the other thing that's really helpful is to know your bottom few. Like I know that Includer's my 34, Positivity is my 33, and Harmony is my 32. So I know that in some environments, I might be a little more, people might perceive me as a little more abrupt, or I don't know, just not as socially sensitive. But they'd be wrong, because I'm very socially sensitive. All right. So now I kind of get into the story, and I use these slides that are more like playful. But the idea is that this is Don Clifton. He's the creator of StrengthsFinder. He was a professor of psychology at the University of Nebraska for many years, very beloved in that community by his students. And as he studied psychology, he developed a philosophy that we need to study what's right with people. That a lot of psychology sort of veered off into focusing on what troubles people, or how can people have psychological problems, and how can we help ameliorate those. And I think that's noble, but he saw this other side, which was, well, there's also a lot of people that are very psychologically healthy, and if we can learn from them, then we can emulate those qualities. And that's kind of what led him to think about StrengthsFinder, or think in terms of strengths. This is before StrengthsFinder ever existed. He just got curious about what are the ways people can excel, what are the ways people can be healthy and thrive. So he began interviewing people, and the research I read said over 1 million people. And I was like, God, that's a lot of people. I don't know if that's really possible. But I was informed that a lot of what he did was research around recruitment and hiring people, and that he had a team of people, and that they did a lot of interviews together over the years. So even if it's not 1 million people, it's a lot of people. And so what he did during these interviews is he wanted to find out what people did to be successful. So he would look particularly at people who were high achievers in their field, whether it be in science or arts or athletics or business, and to find out what did they do to excel. Again, studying from people who are successful, studying the positive side of people. And so as a result of those interviews, he identified over 400 kind of what he called talents that occurred over and over again. So these were recurring talents that popped up in the interviews, that when people said, here's what allowed me to succeed. I was really good with people. I learned how to network. I was really good with focusing and setting clear objectives. Or I was really good with seeing the big picture and kind of connecting all these different pieces together. And so we would hear these kinds of qualities, and 400 is a lot, it's like,
that's a lot.
Yeah, learning 34 is hard enough. So what Gallup does, Gallup is a statistics company. They do the polling, they do a lot of workplace studies. So they're really good at aggregating information and finding common denominators. So what they did is they found that these over 400 talents sort of clustered into different groups, and it was 34 groups. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so each theme of the 34 in StrengthsFinder is sort of a cluster of several talents. So your harmony talent, your harmony theme is really made up of several talents that are related together.
Right.
So that's what these themes are.
Based on Gallup's research.
Yes. And so these 34 themes, they recently clustered them a little further into these 4 main categories, or domains as they call it: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. So one of the questions your participants are going to want to know right away when you hand out their little diagrams that we make is, what do the colors mean? So that's what it means. There's some benefits in doing this and putting it in the 4 domains, but there's also some things I'm a little leery of. So one of the things is that people they read a little too much into these 4 domains. Mm-hmm. For example, people will say, well, I don't have all 4 represented in my top 5. And some people will have all 5 of them be within one domain. And I had one woman who cried because she had all executing themes, and she's like, I can't think, or I can't relate to people. And that's not true, So again, I really want to be cautious about how people use these 4 categories. And
what was the intention of, why did Gallup feel as though they needed to do further analysis? What was the purpose?
Well, I think that a lot of it is that people are lazy. Don't quote Gallup on this. This is all my interpretation. And people don't want to learn the 34 themes. It's too much, Yeah. And don't confuse me with all those themes. And so they were like, all right, well, let's kind of help people along and further cluster them together. So
just to say that, for the example, the woman that you gave the example of, that's just her strongest or most, I don't know how to say it. That's just her strongest set of themes. It just falls in sort of the executing.
Yeah, she really couldn't think. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But it's the idea that, she's developed a real kind of expertise and a real emphasis on execution. So she'd be more of maybe a specialist around executing. But I'm sure she has great relationships in her life, and I'm sure she can think through problems and is a valuable contributor and can make sense of the world and all of that. And as a side note, I actually went through all 34 themes and demonstrated how each theme could be useful for executing influencing, building relationships, and thinking strategically.
Right.
There's a genius to responsibility. It's an executing theme, but it make you think about, what are my priorities and what can I get done? So you're planning how to execute. So there's some planning or thinking involved in your responsibility theme, and you build relationships with your responsibility theme. The people in your life find you to be reliable, and you do what you say you're going to do, and that builds trust, and so that builds relationships. And you can use your responsibility theme to influence others. Maybe you're the only one in the meeting who says, wait a minute, guys, we made a commitment to reach this goal, so we need to do it. And then everybody's like, yes, Jennifer for president, and you influence people. And I could do that with every theme. I could show how every theme could fit into all 4 of the categories. I think the value of these 4 categories is, one, kind of helps you sort out or segment the 34 into groups. Helps you get to know them a little bit better and get familiar with the terrain. And then the other thing I think is valuable is that when you look at a group, you might want to find a little more balance among the 4 areas.
Right.
But not expect that of an individual to be well balanced in all 4 areas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That seems like it would be helpful for team dynamics as opposed to 4 woman who thought she was lacking in thinking and relationship building.
Exactly. So like I have 4 themes in the strategic thinking category in my top 5. Now, I readily admit I'm not the best executor, but I'd be homeless or I'd be in prison if I didn't execute, somehow, if I didn't get things done, if I didn't pay my bills, if I didn't earn an income, I would. So, and I don't have any influencing themes in my top 5, but I'm renowned for my influence. But I get my way, I get my way sometimes. And I use my, other themes to sort of get people to do what I want them to do. So, I don't want people to get too locked into it. I want it to be a useful thing. And plus I like the 4 colors and in my talent to strength model, those 4 colors are woven throughout everything. So there's that. So Gallup has these 34 themes. That's really as far as I really want people to go. I think I don't want them to go too far into these 4 domains. So there's 34 themes. And then what Gallup would do is they would create, assessments to help people identify where they rated among these 34 themes. So they had over 5,000 different questions that they tried to see if those questions would accurately kind of indicate the presence of a theme. And what Gallup does really well is find the fewest number of questions to get the most accurate possible results. So the StrengthsFinder is 177 questions, down from like over 5,000. So they tested these questions to kind of find which ones were the most accurate in revealing the presence of some of the themes. So my dog is barking, and I need to shut her up by closing the window.
Okay, no problem.
Done. So that's my overall introduction to how the StrengthsFinder was created. Now, what I'm trying to get across in doing all this is that the StrengthsFinder wasn't some guy who's like, I think there's these qualities, and now let me go out and test for them. Instead, it was, let me see at gathering as many successful people as we can to find out the different things that they do to excel. Mm-hmm. So let's create as wide of a net. Like, let's not start with any preconceived notions. Let's just do open-ended interviews, and let's sort of see what we learn. And the metaphor for this that makes sense to me is when I went to graduate school at Oklahoma State University. That's what brought me down to Oklahoma. And one of the things I learned about the campus was that the president at the time when the campus was being built, they had all their buildings kind of built, but they didn't put in any sidewalks. So these students are walking around the first year or two, if it rained, then it was just muddy,
Mm-hmm.
But there was a genius behind not pouring the sidewalks. And usually I'll ask people what that was. So Jennifer, do you want to take a guess at why they didn't pour the sidewalks?
He wanted to see the patterns and preferences of his students, where they were walking, where they wanted to go.
A gold star for you. Yes, exactly. I mean, and it makes sense, but I bet most people would just pour the sidewalks and go, here's where you walk to get to the building. And I've been on, campuses where it's like, wow, what an inefficient kind of trail of sidewalks they have.
Well, then you notice that people make their own trails anyway.
Yeah, that's inevitable. But the idea here is that StrengthsFinder was created in the same way. Rather than coming out and saying, here are the different qualities of a person, it was, let's see where people have walked and what paths they are the most prevalent. And then let's codify it. Let's try to help people, let's label it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing for me that makes it so credible. Aside from the fact that almost everybody who's ever taken it, and I've given this to thousands of people. I've gotten thousands of people to take the StrengthsFinder, and almost with like one or two exceptions, people have said, yes, that describes me. That's accurate. I feel like, and I'm clearly not some of these other qualities that people have. It's not like the daily horoscope where you're like, yeah, if you're vague enough, enough people will say, oh my gosh, yes, it says that you're going to learn wisdom today. And I learned this incredible thing, it must be true. The stars must predict my, life. And it's not like that. It's based on, okay, here are the qualities that people exude to be successful. And the way I think of it is that life has its demands that it places on us. We wake up every day and it's just one big kind of series obstacle course of demands, to get things done, to relate to people, to mobilize and influence people, to think through things and sort through information and make plans. So there's these different demands life places on us, and we've learned to meet those demands. And we've particularly learned to meet those demands in these maybe 5 ways. So these are Jennifer's 5 ways for how she's met the demands of life. And no one taught us, no one gave us a menu and said, here you go, baby Jennifer, how would you like to navigate through life? I want some of that, give me a little woo, give me a little, I want a little command, I want a little, positivity, it was just you through your relationships with your siblings growing up. You learned how to survive or torture them, whichever. And then you're in grade school and the teacher's giving you homework and you learned how to, what moves can you make to get homework done? And, then, there's the whole socializing in junior high and, how do you become popular or not? And playing sports, how do you, use your faculties to, make the starting team and all of that. And then in our careers, we only take those further. So you've developed these mental habits without even selecting them.
Right.
And, we talked a little bit about that nature-nurture thing too.
Mm.
So anyway, so this is why I think StrengthsFinder is such a useful tool. And the 2 people that said that their reports didn't accurately reflect them, one of them was this woman who was in a workshop setting, and she's like, yeah, these don't describe me at all. And then her coworkers were kind of looking at her results, and they're like, oh no, that's exactly you.
Yeah.
So she was lacking that self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And the other, I work with high school students, and Gallup says you should probably not have somebody take this until they're at least 14 or 15. So I work with 15-year-olds, and one of them took this, and after a while, she said, I don't think my results are right. And I had gotten to know her a little bit, my individualizer, and I'm like, yeah, I could see how these may not be accurate. And so she retook it, and it was much more accurate for her. And those are the only 2 out of thousands of people. Now, a lot of people might say, oh, it's not that I don't agree with my results. I don't understand my results. And that's why one of the reasons I created the coin model is to really help people connect to their themes. I think everybody will gravitate toward 1 or 2 themes and really be like, yes, that's me. And then a couple of others, they'll be like, yeah, I see it. And then some they're like, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I'm not really seeing it. And for me, that was the includer or the input theme. I didn't disagree with it. I just didn't understand it. But as I understood it more, clearly it's something that's a factor for how I engage in the world. So there's an activity I do. Gallup calls it love, hate, envy. I've adapted it because love and hate and envy are very I don't know, intense words. And me being the sensitive, harmonious, positive includer that I am, I thought, let me change the words. So I changed it to favorite, foggy, finagle. So the finagle is a reach. But the idea is, what's your favorite theme? Like when you looked at your top 5, was there one that you were like, yeah, that's really me, and I really identify with that, and I'm kind of proud that I have that theme?
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
Yeah. Harmony.
Yeah. Good. And was there one that was foggy to you? You're like, I don't really understand it.
Not really. Okay. I really, they all resonate with me.
Good. Yeah. And that would be fun.
I guess some more than others, but.
Mm-hmm. And are there any one of those 5 that get you into trouble? That's sort of like they're your problem child. Like when you don't get along with somebody, it's because of this theme, or when you feel overwhelmed, or when you get stressed out, it's because of this theme.
Well, probably is it competition?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably that one.
Okay. And so that's what I mean by finagle. Like it creates some problems for you, but if you made some adjustments to it, it might create less problem for you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you learn to manage your competition, my co-facilitator in my youth program, she has competition, and there's been some instances where, she would challenge something I said, and she's usually right. She's extremely smart, but there's a couple of times where I was right and she was wrong, but she challenged me in front of everybody. And it was just that awkward moment of like, okay, well, I'm right, but I don't want to get in an argument in front of all these people. So we would talk on the side, and, she isn't doing it to show me up. She's just, it's like she relishes that kind of like sharpening against another person, a meeting of the minds, and and then winning. And so she's really learned to manage that, so much so that it's just impressive. It's almost like you wouldn't even guess she had that competition theme. She softened it a lot, and it's still there, but she's using it more productively. She's finagled it, and so that's kind of an exercise you could do with participants, is just favorite, foggy, finagle, and describe those 3 categories and ask them which. And if they don't have one, like you didn't have one for foggy, that's fine. You're like, at least you're like, oh, I'm pretty clear on what all mine mean. And if somebody had all 5 and they said, I'm foggy on all 5 of them, then that would be useful too. Just say, okay, well, we really need to get you more, oriented to what those themes mean, and to look for how they show up in your life.
That sounds like a good activity that you could do, like I could do at my orientation, where I'll be introducing this.
Yes.
Just a question about that activity. Once you sort of ask the group to identify their 3, how do they process it, or how do you harvest their results?
So I might have them do it with discussion partners or in a triad. Too many people and there wouldn't be enough time for everybody to go.
Right.
And, and so, and plus when you get those one-on-one conversations, people develop those other people in your class who they're like, yeah, I feel close to that person. And that's great. So I like to do, in dyads because then everybody's accountable in the conversation.
Yeah. And then maybe a few would get up and share.
That's right. Yes. And there'll usually be somebody with woo or communication. No, I'm just kidding. But not really. There's certain themes that they like to share. One of the great things is if there's a lot of responsibility in the room, a lot of people that have responsibility. If you those times where you're facilitating, you ask a question and it's like silence.
Yeah.
If you just wait long enough, those responsibility people will feel responsible to answer the question. Yeah. So I always feel good when I know there's a lot of responsibility in the room. You'll
never have a silent moment. Right.
That's right. And if you have woo in the group, they're going to be like those participants that, they might share more in more greater proportion than other people.
Yeah. That's great. Now, do you have that activity documented somewhere?
Yeah, I have like a little worksheet, and then, I have a bunch of stuff. I have my main set of tools that I use almost in every workshop. And then I have this whole kind of like junkyard of all these kind of like little tools that I've tried once or twice, and I just never really, I just forget to use them, or I run out of time, so I know I can't use them anyway. And so there's really no shortage of like different kind of like angles and conversations that you could have with people. And it's almost like too many options, but there won't be no options. You won't run out of options. So that's why, like we were talking in our last conversation, you can scale this however you want. Some people just only want to do it at the retreat. Some people might want to do it a couple times throughout the program. And some people may want to do a little StrengthsFinder piece every session. I think a lot of that depends on your passion or interest in the StrengthsFinder, and then also your participants. They may hunger for more of this,
What I'd like to do, and we don't have to talk about it on this video, but we do a team project like many community leadership programs. And when we've done it in the past, we have asked students to put themselves into teams on their own, just as sort of a leadership activity in itself.
Yes.
But to think about diversity in teams.
Yeah.
So what I would love to do at the orientation, after we introduce positive leadership and StrengthsFinder, we're going to be talking about our projects for the year and breaking folks into teams. And I'd love to somehow bring the StrengthsFinder into that team.
That's great.
Team exercise and in the development of teams.
I can
so any ideas you have around that, I would love it. Again, it doesn't have to be on this call today, but.
Well, we have a few minutes, so that might just be a good kind of thing to get into and then depart on.
Okay.
For extra value. But real quick, let's just look at this and then we'll do that. Just to finish off, these are Don Clifton's top 5. Let me magnify this a little bit for people. All right. So this is the diagram that I make for folks, and so this Don Clifton's number 1 is significance. And people who have significance, there's something about this theme. For some reason, the wording of this theme makes people kind of cringy because it talks about things like you want to be important in the eyes of others. You want to stand out from a crowd. And in our culture and in many cultures, we sort of like, have a negative view of that. And so when I encounter people who feel that way, who have significance, I'm really quick to tell them that Don Clifton's number 1 is significance. And if he didn't have this theme, the StrengthsFinder might never exist, because he wanted to do something special. He wanted to do something that stood out and meaningful and impactful. And so I think that's one of the things that drove his ambitions to do this. And so without this theme, we'd never even have StrengthsFinder. He has the futuristic theme, so he could see how developing this tool, even though it took many years of work, that it would be something in the future that would be valuable. And so that kept him going. He has the individualization theme, which and I do as well. And so he really liked to find out what's special about people, what's unique. But he also had the focus theme to kind of keep him really, on track. And he had the maximizer theme to really get the most bang for the buck and really make this valuable and efficient. So, it's just kind of cool to see his themes. But the other thing that I wanted to show you was this little exercise. It comes from a different organization called Inscape Publishing, and it's a really neat little tool. I just want to make sure I give them proper intellectual property credit, but I've sort of adapted this to StrengthsFinder a little bit. And the reason I like this model is I think it really explains the 4 stages of any project. So when your teams are in groups and they're working in a project, they have to come up with what their project is or how they're going to, the big picture for it. Then they sort of have to kind of like talk through some of those initial ideas some might be ideas that sound good, but they're just way too ambitious, or they didn't cover, maybe there's some really good ideas they didn't uncover. So you need to advance the ideas a little further. And then, you get to the point where you refine the ideas. You really get it into detail. Like, what are the specific action steps, and what is the time frame, and all of that. And then once you do all that, then you got to implement that project plan. Mm-hmm. So I see this as a really nice way to break down the phases of a project. And I know that for me personally, I'm very good at the create and advance phases. I'm very strong. I'm really good at thinking outside the box. I'm really comfortable with having a lot of uncertainty and not knowing exactly what to do. I thrive in that arena. Where I really drop off is where we just start putting in the real specific fine brush strokes and the sequencing and the timeline. Because at that point, I don't really care. I'm like, oh, I know it's possible, and I know it'll be great. But now this to me is then academic. And then executing, for sure, it's like no fun for me at all. So I think that if, for example, I come up with a lot of ideas, and if I was on this team and we were in the execute phase, I'm still going to be coming up with ideas in the last minute. And it's like, Adam, we got to get this done. And I'm like, but no, wait a minute. We can totally redo this differently. Mm. And I think I'm doing something good. I think I'm offering value, but I'm really frustrating people who really need that closure and that convergence. And I like to be in the divergent stage. So what I like about this, and I've color-coded these along the 4 themes of StrengthsFinder, because I do think in general, the strategic thinking themes are great for this, but there's some exceptions, like analytical would very much not be way better for the refining stage than for the creating phase. But in general, the strategic thinking themes are great. And then the advancing phase is where you talk about ideas and you take risks by brainstorming and maybe sounding stupid. So the relationship building themes are really good for this. It's about interacting and building trust. And I think the refining themes or the influencing themes are really good around refining, because they're like, guys, we need to get going. We need to make this happen. We need to break through the indecision. We need to, get things going. We need to win, those kinds of things. And then the executing themes, of course, fit well with the execution, which is getting closure, getting things done, crossing things off the to-do list, putting a nice bow on it, getting that satisfaction from being done. And so I think if people can learn to realize what phase of the project we're in and which themes they've gravitated towards, so they can manage themselves. So I know that if you have somebody that's too much into the wrapping things up, they'll be in the creating phase going, guys, look, let's get specific, let's get concrete. before it's time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have the people that might have these, oh, let's get along and let's talk and build community, and oh, let's come up with these great brainstorms and far-flung ideas. If you have them in the execute phase, it's not productive. So we need to learn to manage ourselves in accordance with where the project is. And I thought this could be a really cool tool for coupling with your group project.
Yeah.
And then there's some points, I know we got to wrap up soon, but there's some points about, well, do you want to try to group people who are similar into, like, maybe have your wild brainstorming group and see how they do, and then have your very focused execute, get things done people and have them in a group, and then have all your kind of relationship building people in a group, and they're just going to meet at a bar, for their meetings. You're going to have the refining group, and they're all going to really piss each other off because they're all going to be like trying to take control of the group. And, you could do that, or you could try to put in some variety, or you could do none of that. Just get people into groups randomly and then have them explore how they work in projects together. Like if you and I are in a group together and a couple other people, then you might say, in a project, I tend to play this role, and this is what frustrates me, and this is what excites me. We have that exercise called your user's manual. And so that'd be another great thing to use for when you put people into groups. Have everybody complete their own user's manual, because it'll ask them questions like, what do you consider to be good quality work? How do you like to get feedback? What motivates you or what demotivates you? Those kinds of questions. And then when they're in their teams, they can talk about it, and then talk about, kind of set their sort of like, I don't know, their code for how they're going to work together, their group norms. So those are a couple of tools right there that you could bring into this.
Yeah.
And a nice way to weave in the theoretical concepts with the actual work. I think that'd be really good design. And I wouldn't have thought of that if you didn't ask your questions. So see, this is just a really good process for us.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to think about this piece more, about how I can integrate this into the process for sure. I think it would be cool. It connects nicely with, I think, and you could use it throughout the whole program, because we're going to be designating, time each month to kind of check in about where the projects are, how people are doing. And so, you could even build some StrengthsFinder into that piece too.
Great.
So, yeah, very cool.
All right. So I think then we're in a good spot for wrapping up this call, and we could maybe, offline, you and I could talk about how we want to, if we want to continue with another call, maybe we want to go through some more of the tools. So
yeah. I think that would be helpful, unless there's other major pieces that you feel are still missing from our conversations thus far.
Yeah, I think that we're covering a lot of those concepts as we're going through this. So I like that approach. I mean, some people might want it more sequential, but this is just a first round, and I would like to maybe try to do another call with you, and then see if that's good, and if not, I'll keep doing this. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, good. That sounds great.
All right. Well, Jennifer, thank you very much for this session, and we'll marinate on it and maybe do another one soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.